Radio TV phono nut here, and we're going to do something a little bit backwards today. We have a KTV 12-inch black and white television from 1983, and you'll hear all the details about it later in the video, but we initially did a video on this set, and it only needed the usual stuff. The controls and the tin are cleaned and a few adjustments, and the CRT needed a bump. But then I did something that you're not supposed to do, and I let it run unattended for several hours out here. It wasn't in any danger of catching on fire in the house, but these generally don't catch on fire anyway. But still, when I came back out to check on it, horizontal deflection was greatly reduced, and we had fold over in the center of the screen. Let's see if it'll do it this morning. Yep, it is doing it this morning. Now I don't know how long it had been doing that when I found it, but fortunately we do not have a brown line burned up and down the screen. The only saving grace is that when whatever happened in the horizontal deflection circuit to almost kill the sweep, that likely lowered the high voltage too, so the brightness might not be what it would normally be. But anyway, it's probably not much to it. It's probably a capacitor in the Yoke circuit, because we obviously have high voltage, which means the flyback is probably good. The horizontal output transistor is likely okay, so it's probably something in the Yoke return circuit, and the Yoke and flyback all form a resonance circuit, so when the Yoke, something goes wrong in that area, that generally reduces the high voltage. So let's get this thing apart and see if we can find out what's wrong with it. Alright, here's the area of the board that we need to be concentrating on, and I think I already see what the problem is. There's an electrolytic there that has obviously gotten very hot, and that is probably in the Yoke return circuit. Alright, this is indeed a 4.7 volt, 25 volt non-polarized, and I know I don't have any non-polarized capacitors, so we're going to have to construct something with what we have to work with here. Now, I don't have any bipolar capacitors. That's something I really don't keep on hand much because I don't need them that much. But what we're going to do to get us out of this little jam we're in is we're going to connect, or we've already connected, two 10 microfarad 400 volt capacitors, and that's because I had a few of these off-brand 400 volt capacitors on hand and I want to get rid of them. But we connect two of them in series, negative end to negative end, and that halves the capacitance, so 5 microfarad, and now it's a bipolar capacitor. So let's see what the little component tester says about it. Alright, 3,906 nanofarad. Before it was reading like 4 nanofarad, which is equivalent to 4 microfarads, but I don't think this tester is all that accurate because I've caught it in errors before with capacitors, so I don't know why you did that. Probably thinking it was going to turn off. Now it's back up to 4,000. 29 nanofarad, ESR 4.5 ohms, voltage loss 0.5%. Let's go put it in the television and see what happens. And I don't know whether all this mess is from where the cap blew up and its contents made their way to the bottom end of the board or what, but we're going to go get some alcohol and clean this crap up. Yeah, I cleaned some of that gunk off, and it looks more like rosin flux than capacitor guts. But anyway, this capacitor we just changed, that is the Yoke coupling capacitor. This pin on the flyback goes down here to the collector, the horizontal output transistor, and it also goes over here through this jumper over to this capacitor, and then the other side of that capacitor goes to the horizontal winding on the deflection yoke. So with that capacitor nearly open, then no wonder it had very little horizontal deflection. Alright, let's see if it goes or blows. Alright, it goes for right now. Alright, we're going to let it run for a while and see what takes place. If nothing else happens, we'll button it up and be done with it. Now, I watched the footage for the rest of the video that you'll see shortly, and I indeed missed the part where I showed the picture tube as having poor emission on the tube tester. That was one of those deals where I guess I must have thought I was recording, but I wasn't. And the knob, it was broken, so I fused that back together with a soldering iron and then put JB weld on it. We'll see how long it lasts before it breaks in another place, but this old plastic is very brittle, so don't expect any miracles from it. Alright, it seems to be working okay, and under magnification I determined that this old cap is a Samyang brand, one only the best will do, but that's okay. We used a very highfalutin brand of capacitor as a replacement, a Legon brand capacitors. Those are top grade, high dollar, very expensive capacitors. And of course I'm being a smart aleck with that. I believe it's actually pronounced in Leland, and I've seen those capacitors used in a lot of modern equipment. I've also seen a good many of them puffed up on the top as well. And like I think I said, those came from somewhere. 10 microfarad 400 volt. They're a little bit too low to use in like a radio that uses a 450 volt filter, and they're a bit too high to use in something like a series string set. And besides, I really don't like using off-brand capacitors like that and stuff that matters. So good way to use them up is just to connect two 10s in series, negatives together, and get an approximate 5 microfarad capacitor to put in this junker TV. And I'm sure that'll last probably as long as what came out of it, especially no more than I'm going to use this. And there they are, not the most professional install in the world, but gets the job done. And they are a bit warm to the touch, but then again, I suspect the original got warm to the touch as well. Now, I think a better option would have been a film capacitor. I realize a film capacitor would be fairly large, especially back in 1983, but I think if this were to fail again and I was to repair it, I would probably just order a 4.7 microfarad film cap and put in there. That would probably be a lot more reliable than an electrolytic. And I've seen this capacitor fail in many little black and white TVs, including those little last gasp 5-inch jobs. Okay, there we are. We're back together, and I actually think the picture is a little brighter than it was before, which makes sense because if that cap was failing, that was probably putting a strain on that cap was leaky, which I'm sure it was before it popped. It was probably putting a strain on the horizontal circuit, which could have been lowering the high voltage a bit. Now, what I put in there probably will fail again. Hopefully it'll last a while, but it probably will fail. But if it does again, I'll probably just get a 4.7 microfarad film cap, get that off of the view before it blows up.
Like the speed fan.
Or is that the view? I think it probably is. It kind of looked like the view, but we don't need to listen to a bunch of cackling women on there arguing about politics.
It's an innovative option.
And then later in the video, I was talking about the upcoming new TV standard, and now I think it's up in the air whether it's going to be ATSC 3.0 or 5G TV, but either method will allow broadcasters to charge for their content. And like I said later in the video, oh, that guy's been around on TV as long as I can remember. But anyway, as I was saying later in the video, I'm not going to pay to pick up something out of the air, but if I were to do it, I'd better not see one friggin' commercial. But we know that ain't going to happen because the broadcasters are going to get it both ways. They're going to charge the customers for content, and they're going to have advertising, so they're going to get it both ways. And I remember about 35 years ago,
you name it, we probably got it.
a retired TV repairman friend that I knew told me that he predicted the time would come when you would have to pay to watch TV or listen to the radio out of the air, and I thought he was just out of his mind. I just didn't see no way that would ever happen or ever could happen. Well, guess what? It's
No matter
here.
what device you choose, you'll be happy to know that if you're
It is here.
No problem.
with our SparkFlex feature, you don't have to sweat it. Like say you're on a road
But
trip out
when the
west,
day
there's
comes that I have to pay to pick up over-the-air TV,
for as little as
then
$5.
I just won't be watching over-the-air TV. If I have to connect something to the internet
With consumer cellular
to get TV, it's not going to happen, because all that is just
I know what you're thinking.
more ways for them to collect data on you, and I'm just not gonna have that.
Will our award-winning customer service help me?
If you're a criminal and think you're going to break the law, there's something you need to know.
Not in Neshoba County.
Not in Jasper County. Not in Lauderdale County. Not in Kemper County.
Not in Newton County. Not in Clark County.
We stand together. Stand with us. Report crime to Crime Stoppers. You can remain anonymous. All we want is your information. And if that information leads to an arrest, you'll be eligible for a cash reward.
Where's your bag at? Hey, boots and send us.
Wouldn't want your hero spanking you, would?
Good luck to you. Court is adjourned.
And these courtroom shows, these ghetto-fied courtroom shows. I remember back whenever I was a kid, they had courtroom programs on TV, but they were not as over the top as they are now. They were more dignified, but now all these courtroom shows are just ghetto-fied crap.
Entertainment television.
Of a live studio audience.
We are going to need to steam these.
You can hear the
Announced that ban yesterday, saying the Ivy League school can no longer enroll
And I
international.
was talking about later in the video about the zoom feature on the box. That's the reason some of your content is cut off at the edges.
Allowing, quote,
And some boxes do a better job at making the widescreen format fit a standard CRT display, and some don't. This one has several options.
As recently as 2024, the moves have even provoked a response from the
That's the
Chinese
setting that I
government,
normally
saying
keep
the
it on
ban
there.
students will harm America's international.
But we're going to let it run a while, and if nothing else blows up, then we can get on with the video. With the first part of the video, get this off of this.
Friends and remember everyone, but certainly you see
Okay.
a spike in wrecks and you see a spike in fatal wrecks, and what I've found is most
Enough for now.
1,000
And this right here is an example of how TV stations are hurting. This is WTOK. Used to at this time they ran a local newscast. Now they're running programming at this time from their sister station in Jackson, Mississippi, WLBT. And for the 10 o'clock news now, 10 p.m. news, they're running content from WLBT 90 miles away. And then after about 10 minutes of that, then they run an abbreviated edition of the local news. So yeah, these stations, they can say what they want to, but they are hurting. And they have only themselves to blame for that, in my opinion. I know one time on a local Facebook group I said something regarding that you'll get more news from this group than you'll ever get off of WTOK, and one of their news anchors unloaded on me with both barrels, basically singing the praises of that station and telling me what all they do for the community. And we've been around 70 years, and we're going to be around 70 more years. And I'm thinking, don't count on it. And you know what happens when you get boastful and start bragging too much. And this is something else that irks me about TV stations. You'll have one that shows all these old programs, but it'll be like 5 or 6 hours of one program. Now, as many old programs as were out there, do you not think they could grab something else and not show 5 hours of the same show?
For your Friday and for the next couple of days.
I mean, it would be a lot more interesting if they would show a wider variety of programs instead of hours and hours of just one particular show.
Miss Manning
Tries to keep him alive. Obviously, I was mistaken. It's so.
But yeah, something like this would probably be a more reliable alternative. A Panasonic 4.7 microfarad 630 volt polypropylene capacitor. And I may order one next time I order some capacitors, but it's really no big deal. Well, I don't know why this search thing on Mauser is freezing up all of a sudden, but I really don't know what the pulse voltage would be in that circuit, being a little 12-inch black and white TV that operates on low DC voltage and a small horizontal output resistor rather. I imagine a 600 volt cap would be enough to cover it, but a 1 K volt cap would be a better option. Let's see what they have in that variety, if this thing will hurry up and move. I don't know why the heck we're sitting here dragging and hogging. We're not uploading anything. This computer, it's gotten so that if I'm uploading video material or if I'm doing file conversions, you can forget about doing anything else with the computer because it just hogs it down and it just moves ever so slowly. Well, I don't know, but I'm not in the mood to fool with this right now. When the time comes, we'll worry about it then. How about that? Oh, what's this? Beyond the Gates. That must be a new soap opera that I've not heard about. I thought Facebook had taken the place of all of the soap operas these days with all of the drama that goes on there. In the heat of the night, one of the last new current TV programs that I kept up with. Well, unfortunately our knob didn't hold together, so I'm just going to have to find another control knob for this.
Facts. They're not always
looks like our vertical is trying to creep up a little bit, so
News 11,
I might have to go back in this thing and replace some more capacitors.
Getting it right is crucial, and trusting what you see and hear is vital. Before we say it, we dig for the truth. So when you see it, hear it, or read it from us, you'll know it's right. At WTOK News 11, this is the code we live by. because facts matter. Local.
Yeah, what you just heard is in response to another news outlet that's primarily Facebook and YouTube based, and they actually tell you when something takes place, whereas the TV news, they don't always tell you what's going on. And people have brought that to their attention, and it really pisses them off when people bring it to their attention. I've often said if it wasn't for that Facebook news outlet that we wouldn't know 3/4 of what goes on around here. But anyway, getting back to that cap and the yoke circuit, I looked at some black and white TV schematics. Found a little 12-inch Gold Star. They use an 8.2 microfarad 25-volt bipolar cap, but they have it in the ground end of the deflection yoke. And then there's a 19-inch Philco from 1980, a solid state set, and that one has a 0.22 microfarad film cap, 200 volts, coupling the flyback to the yoke. So like I said, when the time comes, I think I'm just going to order probably a 4.7 microfarad 630 volt polypropylene film capacitor and just stick it in here. And it looks like our vertical may be creeping down a little bit as it warms up. That's a sign of a cap failing, so we might not be quite finished with the inside of this TV yet. And after it's warmed up for about 30 minutes, the vertical has completely opened up, so that is definitely a sign
Stay
of
connected
a
to your dreams.
failing capacitor. So looks like we're going to be diving back into this again.
The truth is,
Okay, I replaced a couple of caps in the vertical circuit. Let's fire it off and see what happens now.
Scripps News Natural Course.
Up next, on Today It Happened. What's ahead
It
as
looks
former
to be
President Joe Biden fights
opened up
prostate
now
cancer?
from a
I'm
cold
Anna Joy
start,
Burnett.
so
Coming
that's
up,
good.
we speak with doctors about his prognosis. Plus, Vice President Vance asks
Now,
if Americans should have
the
known
capacitors
sooner.
I tested showed good, or the capacitors I replaced showed good for ESR, but the values were a little off. One of them was 1,000 microfarad. I believe that was the yoke coupling cap on the vertical output, and it read like 950 microfarad. And then the vertical sweep circuit component values are rather critical. And when it comes to capacitors in said circuit, about the best test for one is another capacitor. Yes, the ESR meter will catch a lot of bad capacitors, but there are certain situations where it will not catch them. So here are the two I replaced, a 1,000 and a 10 microfarad. And the 1,000 I had is a little bit bigger than what came in there, so I had to sort of mount it up on stilts. And we had more plastic breakage, and this is a critical area on this track where the board slides in, so that's not good. But once we put the back on it, I think it'll stay in place. The knob sticking out of the back of the set will kind of help keep it in place. But yeah, when they built this thing, they probably never dreamed that it would still be around 42 years later. And this 220 microfarad that I missed the first time, it's reading 192, so that's substantially weak, and we need to go ahead and replace that. But the ESR tests perfect for that, so ESR is not your only concern. You have ESR, it's a concern. You have leakage, which you can think of that as equivalent parallel resistance as opposed to equivalent series resistance. And then you have the actual capacitance value. And when you're dealing with bigger caps like this, they can be low on capacitance and still show good ESR. So sometimes you just have to pull them out of the circuit and test them. Well, Shango can have his crepe erased. I've got my Plexiderm.
589.
And the TV now starts up from a cold start with a full raster, so it looks like we've solved the problem with this set.
Any member of Congress has the right to show up for an inspection.
Alright, let's put it back together and we're done with this.
Options start at $9.
Alright, here we go again with more of these kind of commercials.
You get a 30-day money-back guarantee.
And I was just thinking, you know, often we complain about situations,
Use this valuable guide to record your important
but we really shouldn't complain about them because they could be a lot worse than what they are.
And it's your
Case in point, while we're on the subject of commercials, when I was little, I hated commercials. I didn't even understand why they had to have them at the time. And when one interrupted my show, then sometimes I got kind of vocal about it, to the point that my dad would say, if you don't shut up, I'm turning it off and you won't see any of it. Well, back in those days, the commercial breaks were maybe 2.5 minutes in length, and the products that they advertised were stuff that you might actually go in a store and buy, like cereal, over-the-counter pain pills, whatever, take your pick. And they were creative, they caught your attention. Now, the commercial breaks come along way too frequently. Some of them are as long as 5 minutes in length, if not longer. And they just keep going on and on and on. There is no creativity involved. And the subject matter usually is ambulance chaser lawyers, big pharma, or Medicare supplement plans. I mean, yeah, you still see a few commercials for actual products that you might go in a store and buy, but just not nearly as many as there used to be now. I had a TV station general manager jump all over me one time whenever I was complaining about that. He was like, yeah, all you people expect this free over-the-air TV, but what y'all fail to understand is that it cost us exponentially more money to bring you this programming than what it did 40 years ago. And the commercials come with the territory, so shut up and deal with it. Now, I happen to believe more of that amounts to greed than anything else, but, you know, I've about gotten to the point that I don't watch much over-the-air TV. I watch the local news for whatever that's worth, but I get more off of Facebook than I do the local news channel. And even though there are channels that show reruns of older shows, I just really can't get into them because of the excessive amount of commercials, to the point where they even edit scenes out of the show to make room for more commercials. And I'm just not going to deal with it. If it's an old show that I care about, I'll track down a DVD copy somewhere, and then I can just pop it in the machine whenever I want to and watch it at my leisure, and not have to deal with edited out scenes or 5 minutes worth of commercials every few minutes. So, like I said, whenever I was a kid complaining about the commercials, today I look back and I wish the commercials were the same as what they were 35 or 40 years ago. So be careful of what you complain about. It could be a lot worse. But anyway, that's about all I've got for this TV. I hope you got something out of it, and now we'll get on with the part 1 of this video. What you just saw was part 2. Radio TV Phono Nut here, and we have a KTV 12-inch black and white television set from 1983, and this was your average cheapy probably cost $69.95 at a discount store, but back in 1983 that was a cheap price for any kind of TV. This one's in fair cosmetic shape. The white, it's filthy, it needs to be cleaned up. The plastic has turned a bit yellow. We have a bit of paint loss right here on the front, and we have somebody's name and looks like a dress carved into the plastic, which such was common practice back then to discourage theft. And got a raster on the screen. The volume knob is broke. I need to find another knob. The pots and all that are very dirty, as you can tell, but the tube looks like it's in pretty good shape, so hopefully all this is going to need is a good pot and tiner cleaning and it'll be good to go. Oh yeah, and broken VHF antenna, which about its only purpose today would be for aesthetics. And there's the label on the back, a model 12JT, made in Korea. And yeah, KTV was a very low-end TV manufacturer that made both color and black and white sets until at least into the 2000s. They may still be around in some form, I don't know. I've got a, I think it's a 2002 12-inch KTV black and white prison TV that has a clear case and a digital tuner, which is a bit odd. Here's the inside of the set. It has a Samsung tube. Back in those days, Samsung was considered another cheap low-end television manufacturer, along with Gold Star. Now they have improved some in recent years, but still not top-notch in my opinion. And usual amount of dirt on the inside. This set uses a power transformer, which means that there was probably an AC/DC version of this chassis made, and with it having a power transformer, we could convert this to a composite monitor fairly easy if we needed to. You know, we had to do that to one set because the tuner was jacked up in it, but that set didn't use a power transformer, so I had to put a line isolation transformer inside the set. But enough of that, let's get everything out where I can clean it up. Okay, in order to access the volume control, which is mounted on the power transformer assembly, you just take one screw out and remove the knob, which in our case the knob is already removed, and then slide it back and put our neutral in here like this and spray the heck out of it. Did any go in there? Bet it did that time. And then we will rotate the control back and forth a bunch of times, and then that ought to get the cleaner worked in. And now we'll clean these controls on the rear of the set: contrast, brightness, and vertical hold. Oh, that was cute. Rotate them back and forth a bunch of times. Alright, that's good. Now we'll pull the tuner out and clean that. That cover's removed from the tuner, and we'll just neutral all the contacts. And then rotate the heck out of it. fix a lot of little 12-inch black and white TVs this way. Whenever I was a young teenager, when people still actually wanted these, couldn't get much for them, maybe $20 to $25, maybe $30 if it was an AC/DC set, assuming it was a solid state model. It was in nice condition, but if I could pick up a broken one for $1 or $2 at a yard sale and fix it without too much expense or effort, then it was a little bit of money for me. And most of these, the problems were dirty containers, along with dirty controls and shorted power supply diodes and blown fuses and open fusible resistors, usually from lightning, vertical sweep failures, which was usually bad capacitors, or an occasional solid state device if it was a total sweep failure. Some of them had a NTE 712 IC in the audio circuit. It was a fairly high failure part. And then I saw a number of them with weak CRTs. Some of them would rejuvenate and come back. Some of them wouldn't. The ones that come back okay, I could sell. And I never had one come back for a complaint, so I guess they held up. But when you buying a TV for 20 or 25 bucks, then you know, what do you expect? And I'm going to follow that up with the CRC contact cleaner. And then run it around a bunch of times, and then put it back together and see where we stand with this. I found the broken pieces of the knob, and I'm going to try to fuse them back together and put some JB weld on it to hold it together, but I don't know how long it's going to last because this plastic is very brittle. I already broke one of the, you can see where we broke one of the little ribs off of the cabinet back there. So, yep, I've run into brittle plastic on TVs before, especially black plastic Sony and Sharp sets from the 90s. I had a woman give me a Sharp 25-inch color set one time that worked fine, but the cabinet was literally disintegrating and crumbling to pieces, and it was all I could do to get it out to the van without the thing falling apart on me. But there was really nothing I could do with that set but use it for parts, with the cabinet being like it was. And you would have thought they wouldn't have made the cabinets to disintegrate like that, which I think has something to do with the flame retardant properties, because that could be a dangerous situation if a cabinet just disintegrated and crumbled on a big television set like that. This is one of those times that I'm really not crazy about DTV. Back in the analog days, I could have picked up channels off of the twin lead hanging off the back of the tuners, but today I have to jake leg a way to connect a box to the TV. In this case, I'm have the spade lugs off of the 375 ohm balun stuck up in the connectors from the tuner that connect to the screw terminals on the back of the set.
United Healthcare Medicare.
Alright, the vertical is drawed up ever so slightly. Let's try to get this on something else. It's not going to get us in trouble. And the tube looks like it may be a bit tired. When I turn up the contrast, it looks like it tries to blow out a little bit, so we might better put the Syncor on this and check it out. Yeah, I think this tube is a little bit soft, but Really not surprised by that either. Alright, let's get a screwdriver and adjust this vertical. And as far as the vertical, I look for my alignment tool. The two I've got with a screwdriver in is mangled off. Couldn't find my little small screwdriver that would fit in there, so I think I managed to get it moved a hair, and it's just gonna have to be the way it is, because I'm not getting an uproar over this piece of junk. But you know how it works. When it's a tool that you need, that's the one you're not going to be able to find. If you don't need it, you'll find 5 of them. Alright, this CRT is a 310 HEB4, 11 volts, socket C. Or excuse me, 310 HEB4, 11 volts, bias C, socket 5. Alright, I don't know how much of that went through. I noticed the camera was off. Did I hit the power button? But anyway, the emission checked in the bad, so we're going to try to rejuvenate this. And I'm going to say, like I do every time we do this, rejuvenation should never be considered a permanent fix. It's just a temporary measure that might get you by a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, or a few months, but it should never be considered a permanent fix. And there's also the chance you could do more harm than good, which is why I probably should not be doing this, since this tube already is somewhat usable. But it's a junker TV, so who cares? Alright, we'll hold this down for 3 cycles. Well, these buttons need to be cleaned. I say that every time I do this, and then I don't do it. Alright, now back to emission. Oh yeah, that brought it way up. It was down in the bad before. And we'll readjust our cutoff if need be. Alright, now emission. Alright, now let's do a life test. Now what should happen when I hold this life test button is it'll cut the filament voltage, and if it stays up in the green or is very slow to fall, that means that the chances are better that it will last a reasonable amount of time. If the meter plummets down into the red, that means its days are probably severely numbered. Alright, let's see. Alright, it's staying in the green but dropping. As long as it stays in the green, that's my main concern. Now, that's still not going to give me a definite indication as to how long this will last, but I can tell you this: if it had it plummeted down into the red, then we know it would not have lasted long. So this tube, with moderate use, will probably last a fair amount of time, and something like this is not worth trying to source a new CRT for. And the only way you're going to find a new CRT is if you find a new old stock one somewhere. Alright, I believe that's a little brighter. Let's play with our controls back here. Contrast, that's way too much contrast. Actually, it looks better with the contrast almost all the way down. That's brightness wide open, which is a little bit too much now. And an added bonus, the joys of digital television.
Shelton. For Ottawa, this was another unique one.
Yeah, that looks pretty good now, and it's not trying to bloom out.
And then I said, okay.
Chance you'll have another heart attack. We do. Let's add Repatha.
Repatha plus a statin dramatically
Okay, so what are the side effects?
and drops the risk of having a heart attack by 27%. Do not take Repatha if you're allergic to it. Serious allergic reactions can occur. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Common side effects include runny nose, sore throat, common cold symptoms.
I still need to try to find something to get that vertical tweaked a little more.
Pain or bruising at the injection site.
So, I have your late.
Water quality, please concentration.
There's 6 spots.
Alright, it looks pretty good for a cheapo television.
Divvy's head's on the chopping block.
Alright, we're back together, but the plastic on the bottom of this cabinet is deformed, which made it a bit harder for me to get the back line back up. And I got the vertical opened up a little bit. I took that old mangled up alignment tool and pressed on it hard enough, and I was able to turn it enough to open it up a little more. And yes, it probably has some weak capacitors in the vertical circuit, but on this I'm just really not interested in doing anything more in depth right now. Alright, let's give it a signal. And get it on something that's not going to cause problems.
The husband is always...
The husband is always right. Is that what you were about to say? Well, that weather shouldn't give us any problems. Alright, vertical was opened up a little more. And we're working pretty good now. I got this television in a 17-inch GE color set from a hoarder. There's a small town in West Alabama, and apparently this gentleman has a good bit of money, and he bought up every vacant building, or most every vacant building in the area, and filled it full of stuff. And when they have that Antique Alley yard sale every year, we usually go by there. And a few years ago I was able to get a few radios from him. Nothing spectacular, but I got a few radios from him. And then last year I bought a little 13-inch color TV from 1985 for I think $10 from him. Well, this year I don't know what his deal was, but he just was not in the mood to deal. He showed me 3 televisions, this set and the 17-inch GE color set that also has knobs, and a dilapidated early 50s, probably about a 27-inch black and white console. I don't even know what brand it was. I couldn't even find a name on it. And he showed me about a circa 1929 Victor 4 model radio that was restorable, but it needed some help, and the 45 output tubes was missing. Imagine that, the 2 money tubes are gone. I first asked him about the radio, and he wanted me to make him an offer, and I said, no, I don't like doing that. I usually piss people off when I do that. And he's like, well, this is a good piece right here. This is a really good piece. This is a good piece right here. This is a really good piece. Really nice piece. He just sounded like a broken record, and I said, well, you know, it's going to need a lot of work. I might can get it playing, I might not. So, you know, I'm not in a position to offer much for it. Oh, do you think you could get this playing? I said, possibly. Well, if you could get this playing, you could get $3,000 or $4,000 for it. And I knew right then I was just wasting my time with him, and I said, no, not hardly. What? I said, I'm not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. I'm not trying to pull anything over on you, but I've done this for a long time, and that radio could be in mint cosmetic condition and electronically restored, and you're not going to get no $3,000 or $4,000 for it. Well, how much do you think it'd bring? I said, on a good day, on a real good day, maybe a couple of $100. And I said, and that's not likely going to happen anywhere around here. Oh no, this is a one-of-a-kind radio. You'd never find another one like this. And I'm like, yeah, and these things are more common than you think. So I said, what about the old console TV? Oh, I need $100 for that. And I'm thinking, and I'd be doing you a favor by hauling it out of here. And then I asked about the smaller TVs. Oh, I need $15 a piece for those. And I said, well, I normally don't give over $10 for TVs like that. I mean, they're not that old. Well, I really need 15 a piece, and I just finally told him, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you 15 for the color set and 10 for the black and white, and that's the best I can do. Take it or leave it. Well, since you come by to see me every year, I'll take it. But he'll be just another one that will kick the bucket one day, and his family will end up just throwing all of that stuff in a dumpster or giving it away. But he is a classic hoarder. He probably accumulated all this stuff for little or nothing. Some of it probably was free. And he just crammed it all in these buildings, and he really doesn't care if he sells any of it or not. But if somebody asks for a price, then he's going to make them a price that he knows they're probably not going to go for. So if we go back in that area next year, we may stop in and see him. I may not. I don't know. My friend says there's no need in stopping in to see him again, but you never know. Next year he might be in a dealing mood. It's hard to say. But you'll see the GE color set in another video. It's going to need some work too, but this one here turned out pretty good for a junker. And as far as that broken knob, I remember in the 90s those little Action and KTV branded 12-inch sets that you could buy for $29.95 at Walmart and ran on a big 12-volt wall brick. The knobs on those sets were bad about breaking, especially the channel knob. They were too flimsy and too brittle to be used on a tuner. And they especially broke if you had somebody that was real rough on turning the knobs. I'll tell you a throwback to my teenage years of servicing these things. If you had one for sale, you had better make sure the vertical was adjusted right, because if they saw even the slightest signs of creep up from the top or bottom, then they thought that was a sign that the picture tube was fixing to go. Or if people had a set that had sound and no picture, they automatically thought the picture tube was bad, which is not necessarily the case.
And trusting what you see and hear is
unless a picture tube is just stone cold dead, you're usually going to get something on the screen, and it's going to be filled out if the sweep circuits are working correctly.
At WTOK News 11.
And it's also funny, back in the early to mid 90s, I could sell these little sets like hotcakes. And then by probably the late 90s, it was getting harder to sell these. You could still sell them, but you couldn't get over about $10 or $15 for one, and it was usually older people that was buying them. And that lasted into the early 2000s, but becoming increasingly harder to get rid of them. And then pretty much when digital and flat screens came along, it was pretty much game over for the CRT sets. And now it's pretty much game over for any kind of used TV, because you can buy new ones so cheap now. Alright, while we enjoy the benefits of DTV, I did a little light cleaning on this. It really needs a good cleaning, but this is the best I'm gonna do for now. Now back to that guy with all of his junk is that big 27-inch TV. He's like, oh, this is real old. I said, yeah, probably early to mid 50s. Oh no, it's a lot older than that. And I said, no, it is not older than that. I just love it when these people approach me and act like they're know-it-alls, like they know everything there is to know about something, when in reality they really don't know diddly squat about it. And as far as these little black and white TVs, I remember a friend of mine, an older guy, who repaired TVs as a side hustle, and then whenever he got older and retired, he still did it a bit on the side to make a little extra money. And he was at a yard sale where a lady had a little 12-inch black and white TV, and he said, ma'am, what do you want for the TV? She said, I want $125 for it. And he said, excuse me? She said, I want $125 for it. And this is the time when you could buy a new one at Walmart for like $29.95 or $39.95, and he said, ma'am, I can go to Walmart and buy 3 or 4 brand new ones for that. And she said, well, then you need to just go on over to Walmart and buy you one, because I want $125 for mine, and if I don't get it, it can just sit here. Well, I suspect it was still sitting there at the end of her sale, unless she came to her senses, because at that time, that was about when we were getting about 15 to 20 bucks for those kind of sets. I know he went to another sale, I think it was a church rummage sale, and he saw a little 9-inch tube type RCA black and white that a woman had in her hand and was going to buy it. She plugged it in, turned it on, and of course it didn't do anything immediately because it was a tube set, had to warm up, but I guess she was either not old enough to remember that, or not old enough to know anything about that, or had forgotten about it, and so she flipped it on. Oh, it don't work, I don't want this. Then my friend bought it for $1 and brought it home, and of course it worked fine, it just had to warm up. But as far as rejuvenating picture tubes, if you're working on a set for somebody else, I would strongly advise you against rejuvenating a picture tube unless the picture is just so bad that it's unusable. Because the last thing you want to do is have somebody's TV that has a watchable but poor picture, and then you try to rejuvenate it and blow the tube out the rest of the way, and then you're going to have some tall explaining to do. So before you go rejuvenating a customer's tube, you let them know up front what the risks are, and you ask them, do you want to watch it like it is, or do you want me to try to improve things? But it could make things worse, and you also need to make them understand that there is no guarantee as to how long it'll last. It might last anywhere between several hours and several months, but it's not going to be a long-term permanent fix. I do remember one black and white TV that I acquired. It was actually I wished I still had this set. It was a 22-inch Zenith in a metal cabinet from about 77 or so. It was solid state, and the tube in that set was so dead that you could just barely see something flash on the screen every now and then with the lights turned off in the room. And I hit it with that old blue B&K 465 1960s era tester that I had, and brought it back to life, and then ended up selling it to somebody cheap. But I wished I'd have kept that, because those later large screen black and white consoles and metal cabinet table models are almost extinct now. They were almost extinct 35 years ago, but back then there was
one day
there were way more
and
older
showers on
TVs
Saturday
floating
and
around out
Sunday.
there
So
than there
give
is
us
now.
a little bit more humidity there in the afternoon, but some of those showers could pack a little bit of a punch.
Now this
as
TV
well.
here,
As the
I
moisture
suspect
returns to
it
the Gulf
probably
of
hadn't been
Mexico,
turned
increases
on in
more
probably
humidity
30 or
throughout the next
35
few days,
years.
and
That's
the final
probably how
10
long
days
it's been
meeting,
sitting in
we're
that
number 1
old
out of 5 marginal risk
building.
severe weather coming into Saturday. I'll explain all that
But it
now.
does say
Just a few little
something when you
afternoon
have
showers here
an
and
El
there. We'll start
Cheapo
off on
40
Saturday
plus
morning,
year old
6 o'clock there.
TV. It's just been
Start to see
sitting
some of
in
those showers
neglect
rolling
for
in as early
all these
as
years,
11
and it
a.m.
comes
through
back to
noon on
life
Saturday.
with
But
basically a
you
thinner and
here and there.
control
Not
cleaning and
really
a
a whole lot of
little bit of CRT
but just little ice risk
rejuvenation.
here
But
and there. You know, the blow up,
you see these
it
modern
brings a little bit of rain
flat
for about
screen
20 minutes, and then
TVs
they're
that
gone as soon as they show up.
are a year or two old and got some catastrophic failure that makes them not worth repairing. A few seconds of Andy Griffith there.
Carrot.
Yeah, the picture on this is really not half bad.
And has a rather hefty motion to dismiss.
20-year life sentence.
I don't want to move somewhere where I don't have support system. I don't have join like the library or like, you know.
To murder, which without. Your Honor, I don't have anything.
Just like Gina.
We would believe to be the puppeteer, if you will.
On that. Out here.
Glad you're doing okay, Bashir.
And something else I've had people tell me, comment on TV videos, oh, you don't have that adjusted right. That's overscanned. Well, that's not all in the television. That's because I have the box set to zoom to where it will fill the screen out. If I'm looking at a 12-inch screen, I want to see 12 inches worth of picture. I don't need borders at the top and bottom of the screen. But the downside of having it fill out the screen is you lose some of the content on the sides, which is not a huge deal to me, but that's just the way it is. Now, some boxes do a better job at making more of the content viewable than others, but once again, that's just the nature of the beast when they're trying to format a 16 by 9 inch picture to fit a old school 4 by 3 inch display.
Get the off of me! You better have a damn good Post the mercury. Cover.
And finding real solutions.
There was nothing illegal in your bag at all.
Weekdays at 3:30 on WTOK.
When they open this.
Alright, I'm about had my fill of this, and I'm sure you have too, so we're going to call it a day. And I know there wasn't much in-depth troubleshooting that took place here, but we accomplished our mission. And this is what irritates me about DTV. A local station right here in town, box connected to rabbit ears, and all I get is this signal dropout and pixelation crap. Now, if it's this bad for me here in town, can you imagine how it is for somebody out in the county? Now, back when everything was analog, like I mentioned before, I could pick up the local stations just off of the antenna terminals on the back of the television. The picture might not have been that great, but I had something that I could deal with. It wasn't this choppy, pixelated mess. Well, I see moving the antenna didn't do it much good. So yeah, this is one of my big gripes with DTV. And they can talk all they want to about ATSC3 or whatever going to be better, but ATSC3 will give broadcasters the ability to have DRM, which means if they're a so a mind to, they can require you to pay to receive their over-the-air signal. But I'm going to tell you right now, if it comes to that, I just won't be watching any over-the-air TV, because I'm not paying to get over-the-air television, especially the crap they've got on. Alright, I'm done.